One of the key differentiation that Power BI also brings to the table is that it exposes a lot of statistical mechanisms which you can really use in your reports. There are statistical functions that can be exposed up in the ways of showing averages, sums, counts. Probably are more focused on. There are some really There are very particular and specific topics for which documentation is available, which you can leverage. In this particular case, documentation that we're looking at is for conducting time series analysis. There are some really neat and pretty pictures that can come out of it, and visualizations can really stand out. But do keep an eye and leverage these, and you could do things like trends over time. And there is pretty fun animated ways that this report is presented, which you can use for playing axes and those kind of things. So it's pretty cool. Go and have a try if you haven't tried it. Beyond this, from embedded AI perspective, one of the key things which is available is quick insights. It uses machine learning algorithms and those kind of things to unravel some of the insights which you probably haven't seen or you haven't built in your reports, and Power BI can provide that insight to you. In this particular case, if you think about it, it's telling you that components and bytes have noticeably more number of products. Now, this is not going and saying, oh, you're having max number of dollars coming through for this category, or you have more components than anything else. It actually goes underneath and it actually calls out that you have more components, because of which you have more sales numbers which are looking like a strong number for components category. So it's looking at the higher dollar values, sales numbers and everything, and underneath it tries to find what is the reason for something like that, and all of a sudden it informs you that there are more components than anything else. So maybe you might want to go and explore a bit more on other product categories, maybe as a business, to be able to sell more in other categories as well. Again, there is a bit of documentation which you can explore a bit more on. It looks at things like things that you could do on dataset level or focus on insight cards and few other interactions and few other insights that you can really leverage at the dashboard level or at very specific dataset level. Now, there is an analytics pane that you actually can use in your reports, which generally is available in majority of the visuals as well. That is the last visual that's available. What you actually can do, you could add some dynamic reference lines in your visuals, which can help you and your users to understand the context and where the storytelling is basically going. So think of adding things like min line, max line, averages, medians, percentile, increase or decrease, symmetries, and those kind of things. And that can really tell a vis-a-vis view of where your data stands and where exactly the analytics that you're trying to impose on top basically asks for it to be, or provide that comparative view. So you can really play around with that and show that story to your business users as well. So with that, now let's jump on to the next topic, which is performing advanced analytics, and just explore a bit more on what exciting new features are available, which you can really leverage, which take you towards the advanced analytics side of things. So first thing that you could do is identify outliers in your business. Now, in some cases, those outliers are welcome outliers. They are good for your business. They are probably bringing in more money. Or in some cases, they may not be the right outliers. They may be something which you might want to exclude or not have in first place. Irrespective of what is your objective, scatter chart can be used to identify if there are very specific outliers which you need to focus on and then do something about them in your business. You can either do that using the visuals. DAX also provide you the capability. In this particular case, the visual that you're seeing right now, the code that you're seeing right now is exhibiting how you're looking at calculating outliers. And that's a DAX calculation if you think, but it's actually focused more on identifying the outliers and then representing them forward to you. One key bit about data analytics is identifying the groups and bins and looking at the categorization and those kind of things. Groups could be something which user defines, and that can be on the basis of selection, for example. Bins, on the other hand, are the contiguous range of values that you might want to select and want to define a bracket with that. So group could be unrelated values, but you want them to be represented together. They could be certain cities, for example, whereas bins could be something like a subsequent set of postcodes, subsequent months, for example, and something like that. For example, you might want to think about seasons and how subsequent months basically together form a season, and then how your sales number work or perform in those very specific bins. So those are the ways that you can actually concentrate your data. You can actually combine them together, either using groups or by using bins, and then enable that collaboration, that exchange in data exploration, in reporting, in creating the visuals, and then overall trending and analysis that you or your users might be interested in. Another key feature which is available out there is AI insights. Now, when you go and leverage this, what you actually could do, if you go towards Power Editor, you will find that within Add Columns, you actually see a couple of AI insights that you can bring in. And by doing this, what you are actually doing, you're bringing the AI insight in form of sentiment analysis and key phrase extractions and language detection, for example, and in some cases, image tagging as well. You actually add that as an attribute to your data set, and you can really work with that in the business, in your data set. So you are not dependent on another system altogether. We're doing all of this transformation. This is now available within Power BI itself, and that is quite empowering. And then once you have identified these key features, like what is the sentiment analysis looking like or telling us, whether it's a good sentiment or it's a bad sentiment or whatever that is, you can then use that in your reports, and users can actually leverage that as well. Another key bit which we have talked about earlier but is applicable in this case as well is Q&A feature. When you think about Q&A feature, it actually allows your user to use natural language to go and ask questions which are relevant to the data set that they have been provided with via Power BI. And then Power BI takes off the responsibility to answer those questions again with the available data set. And it's quite empowering in a way that all of a sudden business users are not dependent on a dedicated data analyst and reporting team to create the visuals so they can see what is happening in the business. They actually can ask those natural language questions, and the business will be reported with those answers by Power BI itself. Another key aspect which is taking off quite well these days is key influential visuals. In a lot of scenarios, we have things happening in the business, but then more often than not, business is also keen to understand what is influencing what is happening right now. And that's where key influential visual actually comes in. So for example, in this particular case, if there is, sale is increasing, they can actually look at the particular cities and then try to understand what are the influential columns or values which are actually influencing that. And that is something that they can explore a bit more as well. Another very highly used capability is decomposition tree. Instead of creating those drill through, which really works through on multiple screens and can get really, really complicated in some certain scenarios, decomposition tree actually lets your user work through a branch of data at a time. So for example, the total sales is X, then within that, the user can really see that United States market is standing right at the top. And then within that, they can then explore, okay, what is my biggest performing product in those areas, in that particular region? And whatever that product is, where exactly is that product performing well in the cities? And all of that translation can actually be done and be taken care of in a rather animated and visual way by Power BI, and really becomes a good, amazing storytelling for the business and can influence business decision as well. So let's do a very quick demo on analyzing data using advanced analytics capabilities in Power BI. So in the first one, we are starting with the scatter plot. And what we have done is we have got some report already going on. And we have basically gone and played the axis just to see how the data movement is going on. Now, that movement probably didn't tell you anything as such, so we select on those. And we can do vis-a-vis view of all these two products and look at how the movement looks like when we select both of them together, right? What we have also done, we have applied some filters in this. So in this particular case, we have focused on bikes only. So just be cognizant of some of these things when you look at these reports. Another one is forecast. Now in this case, what we're doing, we have got the numbers from past, which we have already reported on. But what we have done is we have actually applied a line chart and then basically went to analytics and just use the forecast length and went from there to say, okay, let's explore with 80% confidence level for one more month, how the numbers looks like. So currently this is showing up data for bikes. Let's translate that to something else. Let's see what the number looks like if we change to clothing. So the number changes, right? So this basically gives a forecast of what is going to happen if this, whatever the current business modality is, carries on exactly as is. The next one is decomposition that you're seeing right now. So profit margin is low for whatever reason. In Australia, it's probably a bit less. Let's look at what's impacting the most. So we selected a few of them, and this is actually doing drill up, drill through. So we looked at Australia, then New South Wales, and then within the city. We can remove them if we like, and then if we like, we can then explore that a bit more as well. And now all of a sudden, rather than going to the state level, we are directly going to the city level. So that's the decomposition tree that we saw. And again, we have chosen certain filters, which is something that we have done in other reports as well. Now, key influencer is last one. Here, we are looking at the decrease. What is influencing the profit margin when it's decreasing? And we're looking at certain cities. We haven't applied any data filters in this case. And basically working with all the different key influencers. What are the top segments? So it basically reports that there is only one top segment in this, which is fine. If you want, we can change that and go for the increase as well. Right. So with that, let's go to our practice questions. Again, we will do the same thing. Let's call out the question. We will wait for some time and to give you some headspace to think and answer in your headspace. And from there on, we will answer the question as well. So the first one is, which feature of Power BI allows you to connect to a collection of pre-trained machine learning models that you can apply to enhance your data. Your options are Quick Insight, Key Influencer, Q&A, AI Insights. And the answer is AI Insights. Next one. Which pane in Power BI is used to add dynamic reference lines to your visual? Your options are Visualization pane, Analytics pane, Filter pane, none of the above. Right, the answer is Analytics pane. So let's review what we covered as part of Objective Domain 4. So we explored statistical summary that's available in Power BI that you can use in certain visualizations. We talked about time series analysis as well. We touched on quick insights and analytics pane and how you can use analytics pane in different scenarios. We also talked about how do you go about identifying outliers. Then we also touched on grouping and binning data. And then we called out certain AI features like AI insights, key influential visual, and decomposition tree. With that, let's conclude OD4. Let's talk about one of the most distinguished feature that Power BI has to offer out there. When it comes to reporting solution, Power BI is not just a good-looking reporting solution. It actually is one of those rare enterprise-grade solutions out there where you can create solutions and reports on-prem, publish them on cloud, manage the work groups, workspaces, your data sets. Within your business, you can exchange them. And really, when you want to, you can take them back in on-prem as well. As part of this OD, let's talk about how do you deploy and share your data sets in PowerBI.com, and also how do you leverage workspaces, which really can make the exchange work in a secured way in an enterprise solution. Let's get started. All right, let's make a start with Objective Domain 5, and that is deploying and maintaining deliverables. In this particular objective domain, we're going to cover two topics: managing data sets and managing workspaces. Let's start with the first one, managing data sets. Once you have created your reports and on Power BI Desktop and have published it on PowerBI.com, it also publishes the data sets. Within the data sets, you will have things like parameters and a few other bits and pieces of the overall model and the data that's contained within it. Please do note that data sets are always published to the workspaces. So that is something that the publisher will have to select as part of publishing the reports itself. Now, when a developer has done that, after that, users are not just able to share the reports. Data set also can be shared. And that really is a big productivity boost, because for the subsequent development, rather than using new data set all the time, new developers or the new reports can be developed using the existing data sets, which is already available on PowerBI.com. And that is actually quite useful, because then you don't have a lot of replicated data that's present on PowerBI.com. Management of overall data sets can be managed better by implementation of parameters, which really again can help in scenarios like what-if scenarios, where a report can be pushed to use one particular version over other, and can also be used in incremental incremental refresh of the data as well. When it comes to dynamic reports, when you go and create your reports, if the data is changing, you could enforce the use of parameters, and that will basically influence the reusage of the reports, and specifically in line with the data that has been refreshed, and then the report structure remains as is, except that it now goes back to a different data set. It could be a different time-based resource. It could be a different resource itself. So for example, in this case, we're looking at a particular salesperson, and we are deriving data only for that particular salesperson in our report. And that's how it can enforce the reusability of your report structure while a specific salesperson or specific data set could be referenced. So what if parameter is a key player when it comes to something like this? When you are enforcing parameters, you basically are deciding what kind of values that the system by default goes with, and then what other values you want to play the report with and see the outcome. So in this particular case, for example, the system runs with a very specific default value, but then you can also specify the alternate value for that and then look at the influence of that parameter value and how the visual changes. And for an informed user, that could help in business decisioning and those kind of scenarios. Again, this is a big topic, and there is a good detailed documentation that's available, which basically outlines how you use parameters for things like filtering, for loading very specific data model or data source, for defining certain different measures, and then a lot more than that as well. Another key bit which dataset actually enables us to achieve is scheduling the refreshes. Once the dataset has been defined, you could set out the refresh schedule, or it can be done on demand as well. And also you can check the refresh status and history and everything, whether they have been successful or not successful and all those kind of things, and you can really work with that. Now, there are certain limitations that you need to work with. Again, on Power BI Premium and on shared capacity mode, I highly encourage you to be aware of those. Sometimes they might be referenced in the exam as well. So just look through some of these details, and that is something that will be helpful for you. If you think about incremental data refreshes, do think about how frequently you want to refresh your data, and that can be a factor of how large the data set itself is. If you want to refresh a very large data set, I think refreshing more frequently means that there is a smaller chunk of data volume that's moving with every single refresh, and hence it's better to do that. Again, there is no hard and fast rule on this. You will have to work with your system, with your understanding of the data, and then work with that on what is the right frequency for you and for your solution to work with. When you go and do this, there is a particular order that the solution will have to work with when it comes to refreshing the data. So what you do is basically you define the filter parameters with which you want to work, you apply the filter, then you define the policy around that filter, and then publish that to Power BI service, which then uses that filter to basically refresh the data as it comes along on the set frequency. So something that you need to be aware of. Again, we have just very quickly talked about it. It's probably better if you go and try it out and see how it actually works. All of the steps that we just talked about is again documented quite a lot well. In fact, that's from where we know how it works as well. So please go through that documentation. Again, a quick reminder for everyone that all these links that we are showing you as part of this session, they are coming to you as part of the study guide. So you don't have to worry about you missing it out or anything. So they will be with you pretty shortly. So let's now go back to the next subtopic, which is creating and managing workspace. The biggest differentiator between Power BI and a lot of other competitors out there is the way exchange of information and reports and data sets is supported in Power BI. And that key capability works off the back of the concept called workspaces. When you create reports, when you create data sets and data assets, when you go and be ready to publish it, you go and publish them to the container or the containment rather, which is called workspaces. Different users are part of that workspace. They are granted access to that. And then certain objects like reports and data sets, they are published to workspaces. So that's where the collaboration actually comes to life. When you go and publish your resources there, you can then go and collaborate and exchange them and share them with your colleagues and with your teams. You can create collections of the reports, dashboards can be created, which can then be further shared with the teams and those kind of things. It provides the one single cohesive environment where a lot of this exchange of information and assets can actually happen. And at the same time, security is part and parcel of this whole solution. In fact, the only reason why this actually works so well is because security has been embedded into it from the ground up. So what user groups are part of it, what kind of access they have, all of that is something that you can configure as part of this. And this obviously go and host and house your reports and dashboards and data assets, which you can then exchange. So when it comes to creating the reports and dashboard, if you're willing to explore a bit more on how to go about it, there is a well-documented approach on this, which Microsoft has outlined, again, available on docs.microsoft.com, which will outline all the things around roles and mechanisms and things to be done and what is the overall process. And you can really work through that to basically get it done for yourself and for your teams. So once you have got workspace defined up and roles defined up, that's when you go and assign those roles to user groups or to users. In general, there are 4 key roles that's available for you to play with. Viewer role is the one which only can view the reports and has the most limited number of permissions available. Contributor can do a little more than that. Contributor can actually go and create content and this kind of things. Member, on the other hand, can do a lot more than that, and that is something that you should explore a bit more on. And then admin obviously is almost like a super user who can almost create the workspaces, remove users, add users, and those kind of things. So again, something that you should explore a bit more. And again, just like I have done for John at controso.com, Bob Joe, if you're listening and you're out there, your mention of Bob Joe here at Tailwind is just coincidental. Now, looking at monitoring usage and performance, that is one of the key features that's available on powerbi.com. When you have created your reports, when you have published those, it's not just about you have developed your part, you have published it, and that's it. You probably are also interested in how the consumption is happening for your reports and for your assets from end user perspective. And that is something which is available as part of the overall solution. There are certain licensing requirements around these things, but let's keep that aside and for you to probably explore a bit more. But you could look at the reports usage, where you can look at things like total views, total number of viewers, what kind of share ranking is going on, what kind of views are there by the users, and views per day kind of a thing. So you can imagine it's almost like capturing a lot of KPIs, which is driven from like how a website works, and basically looks at your data assets and your report assets and how they are being used in the business and shared in the business. And then you also can look at the report performance tab as well, just to look at what is your typical, opening time for the report. Is it slowing down for whatever reason? Is it that it's constant throughout the operation? Maybe if, let's say, a month later after you have published it, from day 1 to day 30, the performance has gone down. So you probably might want to explore a bit more that why is it that? Why is it that, when the time has increased, then probably data is also increasing for whatever reason, and then you want to probably explore that a bit more. So all of those things are available, which is available in one central place that you can go and reference back at. Also, let's look at the deployment pipeline itself. When you create your reports, you do want to look at very specifically how do you want to control your deployment pipelines. Now, for your team, for your different companies, you might have a different standard. You might have different ways of looking at things. Deployments and productionization might work a bit differently. But generally speaking, you will probably start with the development stage where you basically design, build, and upload, which probably is more filtered and those kind of things. Testing stage is where you will probably start bringing in some of the test user groups, maybe some of the business user groups as well, just as a test suite kind of a thing, who will then go and use the reports, probably provide some feedback. They might be able to share the reports internally and those kind of things. Or if you want to control that as well, you can probably control that. And then finally is the real production stage where you think you have done every bit, and then the report has to be rolled out. And one of these things that I will definitely say is that when you look at all these different stages, do keep in mind how you want to structure your user groups as well. Because you could have a separate user group definition at development stage and a separate one at test stage, and then another production version as well. And just be cognizant of that. But if you can keep them in complete sync exactly as is, that's awesome. If not, just be mindful of that. So again, when you look at configuration of your deployment pipelines, this is something that you can look at. You can define what kind of stages you want to control and how do you go about doing that. And that is something that you can read through and tune to your specific likings and your specific business requirements. So with that, let's go and review some of the practice questions. First one is, which of one of the following is not true of a member workspace role? Options are cannot add or remove users. Second is cannot delete workspace. Third is cannot update metadata about workspace. And then fourth is cannot configure data refreshes. The answer is cannot configure data refreshes. Okay. Because they actually can. So the next one is, which of the following enables you to look historically and analyze what would have happened if a different scenario had played out, and they enable you to look forward to predict or forecast what could happen in the future? Options are what if parameters, or Power Query parameters, or dynamic report parameters, or none of the above. Correct answer is what if parameters. Right, so let's go and review what we covered as part of this particular OD5. In this OD, we talked about dynamic reports and how we make that happen with parameters. We specifically focused on what if parameters, dataset schedule refreshes, incremental data refresh. We also talked about creating workspaces and assigning workspace roles in your organization. We also talked about monitoring usage and performance, and then development lifecycle. So that concludes OD5. Now I would like to reintroduce our head psychometrician, Liberty Munson, who will talk us through available resources to help you study for the exam registration process, and what you can expect on exam day. With that, over to you, Liberty. Thank you.
Microsoft has many different resources to help you prepare for your exam, including hands-on labs, self-paced learning through Microsoft Learn, and practice tests, among other options. But you should be wary of using resources that may contain incorrect or even illegally obtained information, such as brain dump sites. If a site promises that you'll pass or guarantees it, odds are good that it is not a legitimate test prep site. Stick to using the recommendations on the exam details page, Microsoft Learn, and so on. You can find a lot of great information on Microsoft Learn, including videos explaining each of our question types, a walkthrough of the exam registration process, the exam development process, and even a place to volunteer to beta test future exams. It can sometimes be difficult to get started, so let me highlight some tips. The best place to start is with the exam details page. Download the skills outline and practice the tasks listed. Complete the learning path on MS Learn, review documentation on docs.microsoft.com and our Microsoft blogs, ask others how they perform each of the tasks, schedule the exam as a forcing function, schedule time to study, put it on your calendar, and take a practice test. As you're preparing for the exam, you really should register for it. Nothing like having a deadline to increase your motivation to study, I say. Register for it through the exam details page. Simply select the register button and follow the prompts. You will need to log into your Microsoft account, and then you will need to indicate if you're taking the exam online or at a test center. After you've made that selection, you can check the availability for the date and time of your choice. Here's what to expect on exam day. When you start the exam, whether you're taking it at a test center or via online proctoring, you will be asked to verify your identity. If you're taking the exam online, you will also be asked to do a room scan to make sure that your environment meets Microsoft security requirements. Then the proctor will unlock the exam. You will need to agree to Microsoft's exam's non-disclosure agreement before you can begin. Once you launch the exam, read the introductory materials, especially the information we provide you about timing and the structure of the exam. This is useful information that will help you plan how to use your exam time. Note the number of questions, the number of sections, so you don't run out of time. I can't tell you how many times I've read comments that someone didn't realize there were more questions and ran out of time. You're responsible for managing your own time. Be sure you know what to expect. Then you will take a short skills survey followed by the exam. Make sure you read the specific introductions for each section, because some items and some sections will not let you go back or return to. And once you leave a section, you will not be able to return to it. Mark questions for review and return to them before leaving the section, or if you have time at the end of the exam. After you submit your exam for scoring, you can provide comments on any of the items that you think could be improved. Once you receive your score, I hope you get to celebrate. Best of luck on your certification journey.
That was great, Liberty. Thank you for sharing those valuable resources. Now, like Liberty suggested, I strongly recommend you register for the exam. You're ready. You're not too far. Let's go for it. Please do know there is a study guide that we are sharing with you, which will cover all the topics that we covered today and some links around that. Thank you so much for your participation and engagement. We do hope you found it valuable and helpful. Please know that at the end, there is a short survey that's coming your way. We would